Macmillan Audio presents The Bandera Trail by Ralph Compton. Read for you by Scott Sowers. Author's Foreword. Spanish explorers found little about Texas to excite them. There was no gold or silver north of the Rio Grande. In fact, there was no abundance of anything except grazing land, and there was a blessed plenty of that in Mexico. Why spend more money for soldiers, missions, and padres in a vain attempt to civilize hostile Indians who had no desire to become civilized? The missions soon crumbled, and the Franciscan padres are a memory, but they left a legacy that may have changed the course of history in Texas and the American Southwest. For it was the padres, forever struggling to support their missions, who became the first cattle ranchers. Having little interest in Texas, the Spanish crown wasn't opposed to offering land grants to Americans willing to colonize the territory. Moses Austin, born in Connecticut but more recently from Missouri, sought and received permission from Spanish authorities to settle Americans in Texas. But Mexico declared its independence from Spain, and the newly arrived American colonists found their land grants worthless. Even as he sought an agreement with the new government, Moses Austin took sick and died. His son Stephen, then 27, had been studying law in New Orleans. Young Stephen took up his father's fight on behalf of the hapless colony, and after many months in Mexico City, persuaded the Mexican government to recognize the grants the Spanish had promised his father. In 1825, the Mexican government passed an immigration law, and for 10 years, Stephen Austin managed the colony his father had begun. By the thousands, Americans came to Texas, all seeking a fresh start. A few were from the north, but most of them were Southerners. There was unrest in the states. There had been a war in 1812, a panic in 1819, and an unpopular land law had been passed in 1820. In the United States, the law demanded payment of $1.25 an acre, in cash, for a minimum of 80 acres. In Texas, not only was the land almost free for the asking, but in grants of such proportions that a man might build an empire. A farmer could secure 277 acres, but if he intended to raise stock as well, he became eligible for an additional 4,338 acres. Most of the colonists, being Southerners, intended to become cattlemen, and so received a maximum grant of 4,615 acres. Austin had chosen the land wisely. The grants on which his American colony settled, millions of acres, lay along the Brazos and Colorado rivers. Eventually, Austin's colony consisted of 297 families, and until 1836, they lived peacefully as Mexican citizens. Then came the bloody Battle of the Alamo, and every man north of the Rio Grande became a Texan. The cattle in Texas had been left there by the Spanish, but weren't very numerous. Many of the American colonists, taking the larger land grant and promising to raise cattle, had not done so. Unlike much of the West, the fertile land along the Brazos and the Colorado was as suited to farming as it was to ranching. Most of the new ranchers raised only enough beef for their own needs, and the Spanish longhorns continued to run wild. The cattle drifted south across the Rio Grande and back into the thickets of Mexico. Herds of wild horses that had once roamed the plains soon followed. The Republic of Texas had become too civilized for them. After Mexico's stunning defeat at San Jacinto, Texans entering Mexico for any reason did so at the risk of their lives. By 1840, there was only a few thousand wild longhorns north of the Rio Grande, and many of these were die-hard old range bulls. There were few cows, and the natural increase was small. Ironically, the millions of wild longhorns in Mexico were viewed as virtually worthless, except for their hide and tallow, and the select fighting bulls chosen for the arena. It would be 25 years, in the aftermath of the American Civil War, before wild longhorns would be plentiful in the thickets and chaparral north of the Rio Grande. Prologue. With some urging from their Uncle Stephen, Gilbert and Van Austin came to Texas in the fall of 1833, applying for and receiving Mexican land grants as part of Stephen Austin's American colony. Austin had originally been assigned a grant of 67,000 acres for his efforts.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?